Hello, I am Louise Lai. I am Transformation Director at Manifesto. Thank you so much for joining us today at Chase Live 2020. And it's all the 20s because we've got a 20-minute TED-style talk to take you through. So inspired by the recent release of our new white paper, Deciding Effectively, we thought it would be really interesting to reflect on the decision-making we've experienced in the not-for-profit sector over the last few months. And I'm really excited to be sharing the virtual stage with my fellow speaker.
Hello everyone, I'm Kerry Blackstock. I'm Director of Supporter Marketing and Engagement, and I joined the Red Cross at the start of the year. And I'm going to be sharing our decision-making journey and how we kept our team and purpose at the core, whilst also ensuring that we had maximum impact as part of our frontline response to COVID-19.
Brilliant. And importantly, how do we harness this experience and learning to lead the rebuilding and regrowth of our sector and organisations for the better? Now, the best starting point is one of honesty and truth, and an uncomfortable one at that. Even the most incisive minds are actually incapable of weighing all the possible variables involved in most organisational decisions. So what can cause bad decision making? Well, first of all, there are things like cognitive biases. So when we say cognitive biases, what we're talking about is potentially something like anchoring. So that causes people to prize one piece of information or value more highly than any other when making decisions. There's things like group effects. So for example, cascade effects. So that causes groups to quickly coalesce around a decision that gets early support, either because of informational signals, i.e. it's a popular choice, or reputational pressure. So someone important backs it. And then there's things like the ladder of inference. So that's a tool that was initially devised by Chris Argyris, a professor at Harvard Business School, which exposes the chains of reasoning that can reinforce erroneous beliefs and drag groups and organizations off course over time. So basically compounding things that aren't actually right, but they just go unchallenged, for example, because that's just the way they've always been done. So we have all these factors affecting decision making, and then you throw in a global pandemic. And suddenly lots of organisations found themselves in a really intense decision-making situation. So Kerry, can you take us on the decision-making journey at the British Red Cross? What were the key areas of focus, and how did you avoid some of the challenges I've outlined in terms of affecting decision-making?
What was interesting about the situation with the pandemic was it was completely unknown territory for everybody. And we've never been in a situation before where the organisation is having to respond to an emergency that is affecting every part of the organisation at the same time. What that meant was that each opportunity or situation was assessed afresh. So we avoided a ladder of inference. And like Lou said, we weren't falling back on that's the way we've done it, or that's how it's always done, as how we approached the situation. For the ways of working, the organisation moved to a command and control structure where we were organised into gold, silver and bronze teams, and it was about role, not rank, and it was bringing together key groups of people to run particular business functions. And each of those gold, silver and bronze teams had short, sharp daily meetings. So it meant there was great cascades of information. And all decisions were made on the most up-to-date information from across the organisation. So it wasn't just fundraising feeding into fundraising decisions. They were driven by what was happening in ops, what was happening with the infrastructure as well. And it enabled any rapid course corrections and ensured a really good shared understanding of the priorities. Because what we did have to do is a really ruthless prioritisation about what we could and couldn't do. And we based that within the comms and fundraising departments. We based that around the impact and effort model. So we mapped everything out, looking at where we should focus for the greatest impact. Because we really, the focus was our core charitable purpose. We wanted to maximise the impact of our services in a time when our services were needed more than ever, but were under greater pressure than ever before, because, you know, we'd lost a fair chunk of the workforce as well due to, you know, the new ways of working. Then within the comms and fundraising teams, because we seized this opportunity to go out with a brand, an integrated brand and fundraising campaign, which focused on the purpose of the Red Cross, we pulled together an integrated team. So we broke down the usual silos. We are quite hierarchical and siloed at Red Cross normally, and this was creating cross-functional squads. And then within that, there was clear roles and responsibilities. So we weren't undermining expertise in certain areas by confusing strategic thought and opinion, for example, and that enabled decision making. And it meant that we went out with a highly effective campaign as part of the Kindness Keep Us Together campaign, which had a give help and get help offer. And so through that, we recruited a large volume of volunteers, raised an awful lot of money, but also reached a great number of beneficiaries that we were able to support through the organisation.
Well, that sounds like so many different things were implemented and you were able to really effectively make decisions during quite an incredibly challenging time for our sector and lots of organisations, particularly when you, like you say, you saw such a big demand, unfortunately, for your services. Bringing all the different teams and departments and kind of ways of working, and almost like you say, breaking down those silos, like what was the response to that internally from the different team members and departments?
Well, there was a lot of real positives, and generally it was well received because we'd been forced into having a real laser sharp clarity of purpose. And through the ruthless prioritisation that we've done, really clear on where people should focus their efforts. Prior to COVID, we were spreading ourselves too thin. There wasn't a sort of central view of everything that was happening across the organisation, and it meant there was lots of disparate activity going out, which is less effective. So being able to come together, and we created what we called the Public Engagement Task Force. Sounds great. There was a shared understanding across comms, the comms advocacy and fundraising teams about what the priorities were, and that was really welcomed. And then the structure that we created for the prioritisation and decision making was completely transparent, so people understood why decisions had been taken and the rationale that was, you know, behind it, which makes those decisions a lot easier to sort of agree and fall in line with.
Brilliant. And I think so much of effective decision making is obviously the way in which you make the decisions and the frameworks that you create, the voices that you have, but also the communication of that, you know, and actually taking people on the journey with you. I really loved the part that you were talking about of sort of sticking to the core purpose and delivering the impact, and your campaign about kind of give and get. Did you feel like a sense of achievement and that genuine impact was being delivered around that sort of kindness in action moment?
I mean, the kindness thought resonated really well with the public, and at a time where people were feeling powerless or fearful, to go out with that message was really reassuring, and to be able to demonstrate the support that was available and the things that we were doing in the UK to help was a great opportunity for the organisation, because a lot of people were associated entirely with overseas emergencies, and actually we do a huge amount of work in the UK. So strategically for the organisation, it was also a great opportunity to give a platform to the work that we do in the UK and demonstrate our relevance to the UK public in a way we hadn't been able to before.
And I guess this sort of leads us on to the forward-facing part of the conversation we're having around sort of building back better as a sector. So as we all know, the last few months have been incredibly challenging for us all, but it has given us the opportunity to reflect and start rethinking our role in society as not-for-profits. And like you say, Kerry, you definitely took that opportunity at the British Red Cross. It's a really unique position. And one of the things that obviously in preparing for this session, me and you were talking about is we don't necessarily need to go back to what we were before. In fact, ultimately, we sort of have a bit of a blank canvas to rebuild ourselves and to regrow our organisations and our sector. So for you, Kerry, what does decision making look like as a leader over the next few months as you sort of help steer the British Red Cross? How will you be taking this opportunity to influence how you potentially rebuild the organisation slightly differently?
Well, I think you're absolutely right in that there's not the appetite to go back to what we were before, and we really want to seize this opportunity to build back better. We're not alone in the likely challenge that we will have to do more with less in the future as a result of COVID. So we really must seize this opportunity and embed some of the new ways of working that we adopted, that, you know, because we were forced to during COVID, because they've made us a lot more efficient and effective and a lot more joined up and less siloed as an organisation. And I've seen the crucial role that Red Cross plays in the ecosystem of society, and that is only expected to become an even greater need and an even greater role in the future as we come out of COVID. As a leader at the British Red Cross, the next few months are absolutely critical. We're at a pivotal moment in the developing of our new 10-year strategy and a new sustainable operating model for the organisation. And so the key elements to decision making around that really are this shared vision and purpose. So we have seen through COVID that we need to reshape our work. We need to bring in the voices of the beneficiaries and adapt our services. So, for example, we know from COVID that BAME communities are disproportionately affected, and we have developed a vulnerability index which maps the whole of the UK and shows where we need to have the greatest focus so we can really, true to our core purpose, be really having maximum impact. In terms of leadership within the organisation, we need to continue to be bold and move at pace. We're going to have to be brave and make hard decisions, but we're also need to create a culture where it's all right to be a bit vulnerable. It's not about the individual personalities of the organisation, within the organisation, but it's about the organisation as a whole and how we can have the greatest impact. And I think we need to continue the work that we've been doing about increasing the diversity of the voices of the individuals included in decision making. So I've said, you know, we have historically been a little bit hierarchical, and we have moved and shifted during the COVID campaign to become more about the role, less about the rank, having the right conversations with the right people at the right time. We really want to take that forward and enable a really inclusive working environment where there's true leadership at all levels. And then finally, I think on the culture piece, really working on empowering and building a culture where people feel comfortable that they can share their voices and their views, and again bringing in that diversity so that we can truly delegate responsibility and empower people to deliver their role as best as they can. So in summary, we need to be really clear about our vision and purpose and ensure that we're having the greatest impact where it is most needed. And then as a leader, I will be taking personal responsibility and being accountable for providing an environment, an infrastructure and framework that enables effective decision making and empowers people at all levels within the organisation.
The final thought we wanted to leave you with is, if we set ourselves up as a charitable organisation tomorrow, ask yourself this question, like, would we be the same? What if we had a blank canvas? Would we decide to transform ourselves into an organisation that truly reflected its core vision, its purpose and the impact? And that impact is what is really needed in society today. And how has that changed? Would we have the same structures, processes, roles in systems? And so with effective decision making, this is
Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into our session. We cut off a tiny bit at the end, but not too many issues. So we've got some questions coming through, which is amazing. Thank you all for tuning in. Now hopefully you would have seen the part where Kerry was very eloquently talking about the next sort of 10-year strategy and what that looks like for the British Red Cross. So one of the questions that's come through is, what are the most important decisions charities need to look at over the next 3 months? So I guess potentially, Kerry, that might be their strategy, etc.
Yeah, definitely. At Red Cross, we're looking at how we can have the biggest impact on our mission, and that's really about focus, and looking at where we really need to put our efforts, because we are expecting, as a lot of charities are, to have fewer resources, less income next year. So it's really, really important that we target that effort effectively.
Great, thank you. Now, some of the things we covered in our session was around sort of charitable purpose and kind of the impact that you're having. And I think that sort of ties into our second question, which is, if you were starting a charity from scratch, what would be the first thing you do? And we spoke about this quite a lot, didn't we, around actually truly defining what your purpose and vision is. Would you sort of agree with that, Kerry?
Yeah, I think you need to be absolutely laser focused on exactly what you're there to do, what you're trying to achieve, and really make that case for support very, very strongly and be able to demonstrate the impact. So that would be what I would focus on initially, what the need is and how we can deliver against that need.
Yeah, and I think what's been really interesting over the sort of last 6 months that we've seen, and again, you touched upon this in the presentation, was actually the changing need. I think sort of what the needs of some charitable organisations were sort of a year ago are quite different to particularly how lots of different people and communities have been affected by COVID-19. So I also think there's a real benefit of sort of reevaluating what that societal need might be for your organisation, because it might actually have changed, and the demand might also continue to change over the next year or so as we sort of move out of where we are now.
Yeah, we're certainly, I mean, we're tackling inequalities in the health system, and the COVID situation has made those existing inequalities even more stark.
So a big thank you to Kerry and Louise. That was a fantastic session.